At the time of the release of this video, it will be 9:30 a.m. on a Monday morning, which just happens to coincide with the time that the New York Stock Exchange opens for business. Now, for those of you who are denizens of networks like Bloomberg or CNBC, you will hear all kinds of terms thrown around throughout the course of a trading day. One of them that you may hear is something called panic selling. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with what that term means, broadly defined, panic selling is a large-scale selling of an investment that causes a sharp decline in prices due to emotion and fear rather than evaluating the fundamentals. Now, as you listen to me give that definition, you might be asking yourself, but Front Porch, what does that possibly have to do with politics? Well, when it comes to the presidential stock of one Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, it could very well be that the panic selling has already set in. My name is Brian Trippett. I am your Front Porch Conservative. Step on up to my electronic front porch and let's talk. Last week was supposed to be the continuation of a string of successes for the highly respected Florida governor. He's had a book tour going on currently. He's been out there meeting the voters, book buyers. He's been out there getting press. And last week, on top of everything else, he had an interview with one of the most prestigious journalists in the world, Piers Morgan of Great Britain. Now, as I said in my previous post from the front porch, last week was supposed to be the cherry on top of the cake. The reality for DeSantis is it turned into a pitted prune on top of a freshly plopped pile of poop. DeSantis had to go back and clarify language on his Ukraine position, where he referred to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine as a regional conflict. Then on top of that, he had to explain to people why the position that he laid out to Tucker Carlson wasn't a complete reversal of positions he held when he was a member of the Congress. And on top of that, Donald Trump still keeps getting the better of this guy, which is the funny part about it. Ron DeSantis is supposed to be the most serious challenger to Donald Trump. He's the guy who's supposed to be able to do it better, and by better I mean move forward a populist conservative agenda without all the baggage that supposedly comes along with Donald Trump, who's just being Donald Trump. Yet time and again, DeSantis can't do it. It's starting to be perceived by a lot of people that DeSantis has a problem, and it's called a primetime problem. In other words, he's not ready for it. That perception is now starting to turn into a glaring weakness, and I'm going to show you some articles here in a minute that will back up that point. Now, I had mentioned that there are some articles that are starting to come out that are starting to pick up on the fact that Ron DeSantis has a weakness, and it's becoming more and more glaring and more noticeable. I take you to the pages of the New Republic, or as the late John McLaughlin used to call it, that schizoid rag. Headline, Ron DeSantis looks like a loser. Now, let me back up and say one thing. Most everybody knows, and if you're not familiar with it, my apologies for making an assumption, but most people realize that the New Republic is a sort of a left-leaning journalistic endeavor, and has been for a very long time, despite McLaughlin's schizoid rag comment. You would expect a left-leaning publication to take shots at a conservative like DeSantis, but it's what they say in the article that really gets the attention. The headline is, Ron DeSantis looks like a loser. Subheadline, the Florida governor and presumptive presidential candidate is falling in the polls and making the same mistakes as past Trump rivals. I'll take you about 10 paragraphs into this article and read you a little bit of this. This is very interesting. Talking about DeSantis' responses to some of Trump's attacks, and let's be honest, Trump has been on him like white on rice. But I'll read you a paragraph. DeSantis attempted to take the high road after Trump's repost of the boarding school photo. I face defamatory stuff every single day I've been governor, said DeSantis. That's the nature of it. Fast forward to Thursday, in an interview with Piers Morgan on Fox Nation, DeSantis finally hit back. Sort of. Quote, I don't know how to spell sanctimonious one, the Harvard and Yale educated governor said when asked about the nicknames. A little further down into this paragraph, DeSantis also drew contrast with Trump, telling Morgan he would have fired Anthony Fauci, and took a veiled shot at the former president's leadership style, saying, quote, so the way we run the government, I think, is no daily drama. Focus on the big picture and put points on the board. And I think that's something that's very important. Now, it's the next paragraph that's the most telling. This isn't going to cut it in the 2024 primary. We even been here before. DeSantis' response to Trump's nicknames and character are straight out of the 2016 playbook. That year, Trump's primary competitors tried to take the high road, tried to draw a contrast, tried to make the case that Trump was simply too volatile and weird to be president. More than anything, it underscores a trend that has been growing for most of this year. DeSantis is not only out of his element, he's not prepared for a bare-knuckle primary fight. Now, as I said a moment ago, there are people who are saying that DeSantis has a primetime problem. He's not ready for it. Well, the New Republic is picking up on something quite obvious. If you're going to go toe-to-toe with Trump, you better be prepared to go slug him right in the jaw, and it better be hard, fast, and bare-knuckled. DeSantis, at this point, won't do it. And I've got another question. Is he capable of doing it? I mean, yes, he's run for governor twice. The last election was a snoozer, to be perfectly honest. Everybody knew he was going to win. Frankly, all the money that got pumped into his campaign was a bit excessive. He was going to beat Charlie Crist by 10 points anyway. But my point is this. Can Ron DeSantis go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump? I don't know that he can. And like I say, I'm not the only one that's asking this question. Here's another article, and this one is even more scary for the DeSantis campaign, if there is a campaign. Take a look at this article. This comes from NBC News. This was from a couple of days ago. And this one, as I say, is really scary. Headline, Ron DeSantis donors, and that's the money that's going to fund a would-be campaign, and allies question if he's ready for 2024. A little further down in the article, at a Sunday luncheon following the annual Red Cross Ball in Palm Beach, Florida, a group of 16 prominent Republicans, described by one attendee as a mix of DeSantis backers and Trump skeptics, discussed misgivings about the governor's standing for the future if he tussles with a former president. They liked him. Many of them might even support him, but they thought on balance his long-term future was better without him trying to take Trump head-on. He will get scarred up by Trump, the person added. Now, here's a really important line. Then there's conservative billionaire shipping goods magnate Richard Aline and his wife Elizabeth, whose $500,000 in combined contributions ranked them among the most generous donors to DeSantis' 2022 re-election campaign. A person familiar with the strategy around Aline's spending said that right now, quote, the brakes are pumped, adding the polling really made a different people pause. The fears of some of his own supporters, along with growing sentiment among GOP operatives that Trump may be impossible to defeat, even with a possible indictment looming over him, present DeSantis with the conundrum of trying to demonstrate that he is a viable presidential candidate before he even launches the anticipated campaign. I said a couple or 3 videos ago that DeSantis has a problem. What's the justification? Why should this guy run right now? And the NBC article brings up a really good point. Why do it now? Look, either Trump's going to win or Trump's going to lose in 2024. Let him have one last shot at it. By that point, because of age and if nothing else, time, Trump is never going to be able to run again. If DeSantis wanted a clear shot at it, he should wait till 2028. That's the thinking of a lot of people around him, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad strategy. But everybody's looking at it realizing, hey, this may not be the time. And what's even worse is people are starting to hold up on giving money. If he's starting to lose commitments from backers now before he ever launches the campaign, that's a problem. Now, one last thing by way of evidence that, the panic selling may be starting to set in. They mentioned polling in this article. I'm going to show you one last thing. This comes from Real Clear Politics. And I'm going to show you a whole group of polls that have been coming out over the past few days and weeks. Take a look at this. Harvard-Harris, Trump plus 26. Monmouth, Trump plus 8. Reuters Ipsos, Trump plus 14. Quinnipiac, Trump plus 14. The closest poll they've got to showing any good news for DeSantis is a CNN poll, which has him up plus 2. That's it. Everything else is a disaster for DeSantis and anybody else that wants to take on Donald Trump. I mean, for example, Investors Business Daily tip poll, Trump plus 29, Emerson, Trump plus 30, Susquehanna, Trump plus 2, Fox News, Trump plus 15. You get my point? The polling is making everybody look at this and go, no, we love you, Ron. We're not giving you money. The polling is making everybody go, let's pull up on this. The self-inflicted mistakes that DeSantis is making is causing everybody to pull back on this. The panic selling is starting to set in. Now, has it reached a broad base yet among the establishment Republicans? Kind of hard to say, but the evidence clearly is there. Everybody who was once very high on a Ron DeSantis presidential campaign is now starting to hedge their bet, and that's not good, especially if you've got to raise money and you got to put together staff. So yeah, he's got problems. So Ron DeSantis had a very bad week. Who knows? He might go on to have a really good week. It might be that Donald Trump stumbles or some new revelation comes out or some new legal problem for Trump comes up. It might be that the panic selling abates in the coming days and weeks and DeSantis' presidential stock starts rising again. Who knows? It's still very early in the process, but as it stands right now, DeSantis is definitely not the same potential opponent to Donald Trump that he once was. Now, do I think that DeSantis is still going to get into this thing? Probably. I'll be very surprised if he doesn't. Do I think he should? No. Honestly, if he ought to stay out of it with one possibility in mind. Maybe two. One, Trump might yet change his mind and offer him a vice presidential slot, although I think the odds of that happening are becoming slim and none. But the other possibility, which is more real, is that regardless of what happens in 2024, DeSantis waits this thing out. Go on to be a successful governor in Florida, finish your term, and then continue to cultivate connections around the country with conservative activists and conservative donors. I think that's his better bet. Now, if he does decide to get into this thing, that sort of begs the question, how long is it going to be before establishment Republicans, big donor Republicans, etc., start saying, hey, you've made one too many mistakes, got to start looking elsewhere. For example, U.S. Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, he's making rumblings about getting into this thing. DeSantis still has a window to make things right if he's going to run, but that window is starting to close. How much longer he's got, who can say? But it's still going to be very interesting to watch. But that's what I happen to think about all of it. What do you think? As we start to wrap this up, as always, I ask for your help with just a few little things. Number one, if you are not a subscriber to this channel, please do so. We'd like to see this thing become a big going concern, and we can't do that without you. Number two, please hit the notification bell. We want to make sure that you're always aware when new videos are coming out. 3, if you have friends of yours that you think would enjoy this content, please feel free to share this around. I'll take all the help I can get. And finally, please hit the thumbs up button. As always, my name is Brian Trippett. I'm your front porch conservative, and I'll see you next time.